Alright guys, Murph's here, and today we're going to talk about this. An IWI Glil Ace Gen 1 chambered in 7.62x3.9. Now, Eagle Eye viewers of the channel will note that I have already reviewed this rifle. This is an update review where we're going to talk about things, how my opinions might have changed about different aspects of it, changes that I've made to the rifle, changes that I want to make to the rifle, and then also talk about the shooting dynamics and how I've developed my opinion over time with this rifle. Is it still shooting well? Are there things that I've noticed? What are some more contextual data that I can give you from my experiences with this rifle? If you're looking for the nitty-gritty details of everything that is on this gun, the features and all that kind of stuff, go ahead and check out the link in the description to the original video. For everybody else, we're also going to bring this video more in line with my current review process, where we're going to go over competitive offerings and all that kind of stuff, and then also discuss whether or not you should abandon your Galil Ace Gen 1 in order to go get a Galil Ace Gen 2. Now, we are going to step back a little bit into kind of the development of the Galil, so if that's not something that really interests you and you prefer to get to like the nitty-gritty of shooting dynamics with this gun, go ahead and check the description. I have chapters laid out, and you can go ahead and jump to content that you want to consume. All right, so with that, something I mentioned in the original video was, as much as I've always loved the Galil Ace, or excuse me, the Galil rifle, and this is going back to the granddaddy Galil, I always found that it not being chambered in 7.62x3.9 was a huge miss. It looked like a gun that needed to be chambered in 7.62x3.9, and instead it was chambered in 5.56 and 308. The development of the Galil is very interesting to me because we start off with the Israelis getting their first experience with the AK and going, man, that's pretty sweet. We'd like to make it a little bit better though. So they made some changes, made some updates to the system, and then also started taking international. Now, the Galil has had an interesting progression in change over time. For the most part, the original gun was kind of wood and steel. It was a stamped receiver and all that kind of stuff, but it was what it was. As we started to get into the micro Galil and more foreign exports and all that kind of stuff, we started to see like plastic furniture make its way onto the gun. The biggest change, of course, was when the Galil Ace came out, which was IWI's attempt to modernize the Galil, bring it into the 21st century. And that is when the 7.62x3.9 offering got added in, and that is when I picked up this rifle. Now, the Galil Ace has actually gone through a lot of changes that kind of, in some ways, harken back to the original Galil. Now, there are really only two, I guess, I don't want to say demographics. There were two customers when it came to the 7.62x3.9 chambered Galil Ace. That was Vietnam and South America. Now, South America would get a rifle that would look largely like this, but one of the things that I find interesting about the Galil Ace is that a lot of the foreign export guns don't have this full-length Picatinny rail across the top. Instead, it's actually broken up into independent sections. I find that really weird why they wouldn't just go with the whole shebang. There generally seems to be a gap between like this section of the rail and then the railed gas tube, which I find that very odd. You see that same type of thing on the licensed produced 5.56 and shorty 7.62x3.9 guns found in the Ukraine. Vietnam would go a very different route with the Galil Ace. They would go ahead and get rails, and again, they would have different segments of rail section, much shorter rail sections than what we see on this particular rifle. But they would decide that they didn't want the left side charging handle. They wanted to maintain a right side charging handle. They also decided that they didn't like the telescoping stock and instead went with a side folding stock only. And I find those differences, this being the STV 380, which there's a couple of different STVs and all the numbers all correlate to the barrel length. I find it very interesting that they went away from all of the modernized features of the Galil Ace and instead went with something that followed much more closely to the AKM pattern. And my assumption is they didn't necessarily want to change the manual of arms for their troops. I feel like if you're getting a rifle that has modern optics on it and all that kind of stuff, why wouldn't you just go ahead and also add in like the left side charging handle and all those types of things? But you know what? Every customer is different, so they got what it is that they wanted. Now, at one point in the Galil Ace, in its closing years before we went to the Gen 2, they did come out with a 5.56 chambered Galil magazine variant, with the Rock and Lock Galil mags. Very limited production of those were made, as well as 5.45 guns in the Gen 1. Very limited production of 5.45 Rock and Lock magazine Galil Aces were made. And then that brings us into the Galil Ace Gen 2, which now has 5.45 as a standard offering, and also incorporated a free float M-lock rail. Now, interesting thing about free float M-LOK rails does not mean that you have a free float barrel, because you can't really have a free float barrel with a long stroke gas piston. That's not how free floating works. But you can have a free floating handguard. So Gen 2s have gone to the full length M-LOK handguard and also modernized some of the controls. We'll talk about that more here in a bit. Now, my tastes towards the Galil have changed over time to where I would actually be very interested in either getting a hold of a Gen 1 5.56 chambered gun with a rock and lock magazine, or a Gen 2 chambered in 5.56 with the rock and lock magazines. I've kind of come full circle. Like originally when the Galil was chambered in 5.56 with rock and lock magazines, I was like, man, they really should make that in 7.62 by 3.9. And now I want the more modernized rifle with the older style magazines and the 5.56 chambering. I am who I am. I can't help it. All right, so with that, guys, I want to go ahead and start talking through features and stuff like that of this particular rifle, changes that I would make or not make. Starting off, talking about the gas system on this. So when this rifle first came out, the Military Arms channel took it out and popped a suppressor on it and found an issue. Now, it's important to remember that whenever it is that we're talking about any sort of repeating system, handgun, rifle, shotgun, it doesn't matter. The function of those systems is a careful balance of like bolt travel, gas pressure, springs, all that kind of stuff in order for them to operate effectively. So when a high back pressure can was put on this rifle, the bolt velocity would increase to the point to where it would outrun the magazine spring and it would induce malfunctions. And that is because these rifles are incredibly overgassed. A lot of your fighting rifles are overgassed. They are overgassed. The M4, the Mark 18, and pretty much every AK out on the market is overgassed so that they will run no matter what. Your environment doesn't matter. Whatever debris you have caked on the gun doesn't matter. The number of rounds that have been fired doesn't matter. The gas system is enough to keep the gun running for an extended period of time. This is not necessarily meant to be some sort of gamer gun. So when it comes to suppressing this rifle, you've got two options. A, go with a flow-through suppressor and accept the slight increase in decibels. Or B, go with a KNS adjustable gas piston. Now, guys, it's important to note, first off, I would not recommend putting a suppressor on this 16-inch gun. It's already 16 inches. You're adding another 6 to 8 inches with a suppressor. That's a lot of length. And it also further upsets the forward biased balance point of this rifle. We'll talk about that more as we go. With the pistols or something along those lines, yes, absolutely, I would consider those to be good suppressor hosts, and I personally would go with a flow-through suppressor because I am not a big fan of adjustable gas systems. This is a fighting rifle to me, so I expect my fighting rifle to be functionally blind. I'm just going to pick this thing up at any time and it's going to be ready to go. That's my expectation out of fighting rifles. Now, if you're talking about this being like a competition gun or just a gun that you go out and have fun with your friends, like a gamer gun of some sort, absolutely, KNS adjustable gas piston, tune the gas to where it is that you need it, to where you have less disturbance to your sights, but you still have optimal function with that type of ammunition. But it's important to remember that that is going to be very finicky when it comes to ammunition, but also environmental change. It's the same thing whenever someone talks about adjusting like buffers in AR-15s. That is part of the careful balance to keep a rifle functioning. So, where I live now, I have 100-degree summers and then I have -degree winters. So if I take this rifle with a KNS adjustable gas piston and get it all tuned up and ready to go in June, come January, I may not have a functioning rifle, or vice versa. That does not meet my requirements for a fighting rifle. That's why I'm fine with overgassed guns. Like, yes, does it cause more disturbance to the sights? The recoil is negligible. It's not like it's breaking my shoulder, but does it cause the rifle to move around a little bit more whenever it is that I'm shooting? Yes, absolutely. But I accept it in order to make sure that the rifle's going to function. That is a conscious trade-off that I am willing to make. Now, someone might point out, Murph, the FN FAL had an adjustable gas system, and that was the right arm of the free world, adopted by over 90 countries. Yes, that is true. That did happen. The FAL is a very early and widely accepted semi-automatic and, in some cases, select fire rifle system. This harkens back to a time where maybe there wasn't the highest level of trust in gas-operated rifles. And then also when you talk about going with NATO standardization and all that kind of stuff, an acceptance of the idea that some countries may not necessarily be able to achieve the same production precision as others. So in the case of the FAL, World War III kicks off, everyone's going to war with, the Warsaw Pact and all that kind of stuff. And you've got British troops fighting alongside, pick an African nation. and they have to share ammunition. Well, they may need to tune their rifles if, say, one of those countries is providing the ammunition and has like a wider standard deviation in their ammo, which is not that uncommon whenever it is that we talk about even like M80 ball in the United States military. Like there's quite a bit of fluctuation in those pressures. So we could reasonably expect that maybe, especially in wartime production, that there would be some manufacturing issues that might cause a rifle to bog down with a lighter loaded round. By no fault to the soldier, that's for sure. However, war is a terrible time. The middle of battle is a terrible time to need to tune your gas system. So that's why everyone's gone to having overgassed guns instead of adjustable gas pistons whenever it comes to military rifles, for the most part. All right, so enough about that. Let's go ahead and talk about these iron sights. These iron sights have tritium inserts, and I absolutely love that. I love these iron sights. These are fantastic iron sights. And my favorite thing about them is, first off, the rifle comes with them, which is not something I can say for the Gen 2, and that they are night sights. So when you buy this rifle and you pay a not insignificant sum of money when these were still being produced, you could get this to the range, zero it, and then it could be in service out of the box as a home defense gun, because you now have a night fighting capability. You don't need to add an optic in order to be able to get that. Of course, you'd want to eventually add a light, but I'm saying before you purchased anything else, this rifle's ready to go, and I appreciate that. And that's where I stand in general whenever we talk about AR-15s and manufacturers, where manufacturers are like, well, there's so many different iron sight options out on the market, so we don't want to provide charge you guys for iron sights that you don't even want to begin with. It's such an individual thing. I don't agree with that. Even if I don't like the iron sights that I'm given, at least the gun is ready to go. I can take it to the range, I can zero it, and I can fight with it the next hour if I needed to. And that's what I think is more important. Instead of having to make additional purchases, just provide the iron sights. Guns should be functional and ready to go out of the box. Even Glock with their plastic sights. Like, are the plastic sights great? No. I'm going to replace those sights. Does that mean that Glock should stop producing guns with sights? Absolutely not. That gun should come from the factory ready to rock. And anything after that is my personal preference. I'm going to make updates to guns anyway. That doesn't mean don't provide me the starting point to work off of. It's a little rabbit hole there, but that's just that's something that I've firmly believed in for a very long time. All right, now, you guys will notice that I've made a change to my light setup. Originally, I had what I refer to as a Picatinny inception going on here. So I bought a Picatinny mount that attached to this top Picatinny rail that then had a offset Picatinny rail that I could Picatinny attach this light onto. See where the Picatinny inception comes from? And that's because I've changed my light mounting methodology here in the past couple of years to where I want my light at a 45-degree angle off of the rail. That way, when I'm running like clicky tail caps, because I still prefer to run clicky tail caps in order to cut down the possibility of negligent discharge of light, so I can operate that with my thumb, and then if for whatever reason I'm doing cross-shoulder stuff, I can still wrap around and get that light with my support hand from either direction. However, I decided I didn't like that Picatinny inception thing that I had going on there. What I've been trying to move to is getting integrated 90-degree mounts on all of my lights, be it from Arisaka Defense or whoever, in order to be able to mount them in the position that I want them. So I remove the Picatinny base that they come with and add an M-lock or an offset Picatinny, whatever it is that I need it to be. However, this Streamlight HLX laser does not have an adapter out there made for it in order to be able to get that position. So I eliminated the Picatinny inception in order to decrease the number of points of failure. And then I just straight attached this light to the rail and ran my pressure pad on top. Now, this HLX laser is 10-tap programmable and all that kind of stuff. Right now I have it set to momentary on with laser, and I can also strobe, should I so choose. Now, this, of course, necessitated me to remove more of the rail covers, and now I've pretty much eliminated all the rail covers because I actually like how much more slim this rail became once I took the covers off. Now, one of the interesting things about these rail covers is that in addition to covering up the Picatinny mounts that they have here, they have cutouts in order to be able to run the cables for your pressure pads, and then a corresponding hole can be punched out in order to be able to press through the handguard and activate your light. However, this plumbing is for a much older style of light. We're talking like back to incandescent bulbs and 100 lumens or something along those lines. Something like this pressure pad we see here mounted on top will not run in there. However, I can still use those channels, as we can see here, to be able to run my wires through so that I still have some cable management going on there, which that's nice. I do appreciate that. And then also I do have a constant on capability as well with the forward button. Now we can see here on the bottom of the rail, I still have my little angle grip here. I ran it more further forward so that I can get a little bit more stretched out onto the rifle. This is from BCM. It actually wobbles a lot. I was just trying to like see if I could tighten it up some more, and it's still very wobbly. So that is like mildly annoying, but otherwise it works fine for what it is that I'm trying to do. I would prefer to go to a more vertical stubby grip. It just gets kind of difficult when you talk about that with AKs because you have the Rock and Lock magazine, so you need a lot of space off the bottom of the rifle. And, like a full length old like broom handle or something like that could potentially get in the way. But one of the things with that is that we have this very short handguard, and I would like to have a more vertical grip so that I can change how it is that I'm tensioning my forearm. So when I do this, you can see here I've got like a lot more of a bend in my forearm as I try to get out there and like really control the rifle and all that kind of stuff, and I'm chicken winging a lot. Whereas if I could have more of a vertical grip, I would chicken wing a little bit less. I'm still going to chicken wing some because it's a short handguard, but it would put my wrist into a better position that would put less strain on my arm. We'll talk about that a little bit more once we get into the shooting dynamic and all that kind of stuff. Now, of course, these are these short Picatinny handguards. You can get M-LOK handguards to replace these. They may not necessarily run all the way out to the end of the muzzle, or close to the end of the muzzle, like the Gen 2s do. However, it would give you more modern rails. One of the things that I like about this rail, though, or this handguard, is that it's heat shielded, which you don't necessarily have that with the M-LOK rails. And sure, they have some distance off the barrel, but those rails can still heat up. So I consider these a sustain. I would not get rid of them personally. I would keep the heat shields. Kind of sticks with my theme of this is a fighting rifle to me. All right, let's go ahead and talk about this optic. This is still an Aimpoint Comp M2. I still absolutely love this optic. One of the things that I like about this optic even better now is that I don't have my Picatinny Inception going on the front. That was partially inhibiting my view through the 6.8. So now I've got that, or through the Comp M2. Now that that's out of the way, I've got a nice clear field of view to be able to engage whatever target is at A2. I can somewhat see this pressure pad, but it doesn't take up near as much space as the old rail mount, the old offset light mount used to. All right, now the one complaint that I do have about this optic, though, is how close the knob runs to the charging handle. And I'm becoming increasingly concerned that at some point I'm going to grab the tightening knob for the Comp M2 instead of the bolt. It hasn't happened yet, and I also haven't racked my knuckles on it, and I shouldn't because the bolt is slightly behind. The charging handle is slightly behind. So as long as I'm coming in and sweeping that just right, it really should never become an issue. However, it's something that I've been like increasingly low-key concerned about. Someone might say, well, Murph, why don't you just go ahead and like flip the optic around? Like, can't you just unscrew that and remount it? I could. However, that's then going to put the bolt over top of the over top of the ejection port, because I still want to keep this out at the end of the rail like it is now. So with that being the case, this thing hooks brass, and I'm pretty sure I would wind up hitting that knob as I did that. So that'd be kind of annoying. If it really bugs me, if it ever does actually become a problem, what I'll wind up doing is just taking this optic off of here and going with a more streamlined optic. Which, it's not like I would get rid of this optic. I love the Comp M2 and the Comp M4. I love Aimpoint optics in general. So I would just put it on something else. But currently, it's not that big of a deal. I'm leaving it alone. Now, something I talked about in the original video was possibly scalloping out this section here in order to make magazine insertion more easy. I have since gone away from that plan because I still want to keep as much of this rifle original as I can. as I go through and like make changes and all that kind of stuff. And this is not something that I necessarily feel like deleting, especially because I've kind of changed my methodology when it comes to magazine changes with this particular rifle. I don't necessarily, like, something I previously did or was training around was doing magazine changes off of my shoulder, but with that forward preference on my balance point, that really puts a lot of strain on my arm. So now I'm just going into doing workspace reloads with this rifle. So flicking out with my thumb, with magazine in hand, rocking in new magazine, running charging handle, getting back to it. Is that a more gross motor movement? Like, is it not as streamlined as just doing it off of my shoulder? Which right now, guys, my elbow's cramping on me because I haven't adequately hydrated after the gym this morning. Need to work on that. But is that less streamlined? Absolutely. Is it more reliable of a reload that puts less strain on me? Yes. And this isn't necessarily a matter of like, oh, well, you just need to go lift more weights. Like, I'm at a disadvantage with the balance point on this rifle. I need to do things to change that. Some of it might be eliminate this light, because this is a very large, very bulky light, and I would like to do that at some point. However, up until then, this is the setup I got, and I got to work around it as best I can to maintain my own battery life and keep the rifle running efficiently. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the trigger real quick. So this is a typical AK style trigger, not unlike an MP5, to where you kind of have a wall, but it's more of a suggestion of a wall than it is an actual wall. So I characterize AK triggers, just like MP5 triggers, as like double action triggers. That's how I think about them, to where you don't necessarily try to like take out all the slack and get on the wall and do that type of shooting as much as you just kind of run through it. And there's a fair amount of take up, and there's also some over travel and stuff like that, which is an issue with these style of triggers. But when it comes to trying to run these a little bit faster, it ain't bad. We'll talk about that more once we get into shooting. All right, now selector, of course, we have the more AK style selector here on this side, as well as the push button here on this side. I can run this push button either way. I have to break my grip more in order to be able to place it back on safe. So generally, I will push it forward for fire, and then I will sweep up for safe. Trying to sweep down for fire, you have less surface area to be able to interact with. So it's a little bit more difficult, and I prefer to use the thumb safety in that case instead of what I refer to as the hand safety. On the new Gen 2s, the hand safety is a little bit easier to work around. They cut it in such a manner that you can get like better pressure on it, like more even pressure on it in order to be able to take it on and off. So I do like this new safety on the Gen 2s. All right, now pistol grips. You can get, because this is just a plastic, not even actually a lower, like this is not serialized or anything along those lines. You can get another plastic insert that allows you to be able to add whatever AR-15 style grip you like. I am not bothered by this grip. I don't really get broken up about most grips. The only thing that there are two things that I get annoyed by. One, a lot of like older stock AK grips that feel like you're holding a popsicle stick. And then two being the A2 bump on an AR-15, like a standard AR-15 grip. Like, I can't stand that. That does grind on me. I take those off. This has kind of an A2 bump, but it doesn't really bug me. It's got a decently ergonomic shape, but like, you'll never see me like really going out and being like, I need this style of grip. I have grips that I like, but I'm not that broken up about them at the end of the day. And this would be another one. I would not necessarily swap this out. If that's important to you, that is something that you can do. Let's go ahead and talk about the sling. I absolutely despise the sling. I just haven't gotten around to replacing it yet. This is the padded, non-adjustable sling. There's just too much of it, and it like catches on things, and it's really obnoxious. It's amazing how much a sling can really impact your feelings about a rifle. All right, this stock. Now the Gen 2s have gone to an AR-15 telescoping style stock, so you can have whatever type of AR-15 stocks that you like. You can get that for these rifles as well. You can swap out this stock and get an AR-15 buffer tube so that you can put whatever AR-15 stocks you want on it. However, this stock already characterizes a lot of things that I would look for in an AR-15 stock. It's nice and slim. I've got a little bit of a cheek piece here, not too much, which is fine with me. I don't consider cheek pieces to be all that great, like Sopbond stocks, I absolutely despise. You can, like this does come with a cheek riser that you can put on here. I've never found the need to use it because I don't run a magnified optic. So I haven't found that to be detrimental to my purposes. And in general, I'm completely fine with the stock. And of course, I love the telescoping aspect of it because it suits my needs nicely. Or excuse me, I like the side folding aspect of it because it suits my needs nicely. All right, guys, that's features. Why don't we go ahead and get into shooting? How's this thing been holding up? All right, guys, something I mentioned in the previous video, and I've mentioned several times in this video, is that muzzle end heaviness of this rifle. There's absolutely no weight back here, and all of the weight is up here, even without this light, but the light's also not helping. So how has that been impacting working around the rifle? Well, we already talked about magazine changes. Let's talk about shooting dynamics as well. So I've found that like shooting in the prone position with this gun, the forward balance of the weight actually kind of helps the rifle settle back down on the target. So yes, it's overgassed. We have a lot of reciprocating mass. The rifle has a tendency to bounce that dot around a lot. But when shooting from the prone position, it's a lot faster to get back on target with how this rifle is weighted. To where at a certain point, I'm actually just outrunning the ability for the target to stop wiggling because the steel targets that I shoot at are dangling targets. So they take a hit and then they swing around a whole lot. If you try to get an additional shot on them too fast, even though you were holding on the target in that snapshot in time, it'll wiggle enough that you'll actually wind up pulling the shot. Now, shooting from a standing position, I again feel that strain and I lose the positivity of that forward balance at that point because now my arm is working overtime to try to keep this thing steady and on target and all that kind of stuff. So that does kind of slow down your strings at that point. Let's see here. Let's go ahead and talk about accuracy updates. So, I took this thing back out to the range and I shot it with some Sterling 123 grain FMJs and I turned in this 4-inch group, which is pretty consistent for what the rifle has been able to do. Now, red dot, crappy ammunition, it is what it is at the end of the day. I've taken this rifle out to 440 yards and hit 8-inch steel. So it can do better than 4 inches, that's for sure. And I've done it pretty regularly. It's not like I had to send 30 rounds downrange in order to be able to get one hit. Like once I figured out my holdovers or hold unders across the span of ranges, I've been able to pretty well dial this rifle in. So accuracy wise, it is minute of man, which is all I really want out of a fighting rifle to begin with. Now, Murph, what about like more dynamic type stuff? So I did do some turn drills with this the other day. And one of the things that I found, especially when it came to identifying my target and then turning into the spin, I could kind of throw this rifle out there, which helped bring me around to where it is that I needed to be. Like I kind of used that in my favor. And then when it came to hammering onto the target and all that kind of stuff, like I kept everything in A zone pretty much the entire time. I think I had one flyer at one point. Early string, just started pulling the trigger a touch too early. But that's one of the things about this. So while this trigger, this is the Galil sniper trigger, while this may not be necessarily the best like precision trigger in the world because of that rolling break and all that kind of stuff, when it comes to trying to run the rifle a little bit faster, that makes it somewhat easier. because you're just going. There's not like a whole bunch of tension that suddenly builds up and all that kind of stuff. Like the trigger just has like a lot of pre-travel and a lot of over-travel. But the wall is a very clean and easy break. So on that drill, I think the best I got was 2.99. And that was with properly identifying the target, moving the gun to the target, and then engaging. So overall, shooting dynamic with this particular rifle, do I wish that I had longer handguards to be able to get more splayed out on the rifle in order to be able to control it? Absolutely. Do I wish I could get my wrist into a better position in order to be able to drive this rifle comfortably? Yes, absolutely. Does this rifle make it so that I can't fight with it? Absolutely not. I can still work through these things. I can still do them. All right, so with that, why don't we go ahead and get into recommendations? Would I recommend this as a duty rifle? Depends on the duty. If you're a police officer, AKs and AK layout guns have a tendency to have a little bit of a bad rap. It's not necessarily a good look whenever it is that you see the police with AKs, at least in a lot of countries. That's not necessarily what it is that you want to see. But if you're in some other type of profession that is not law enforcement and you carry a gun for a living, a Galil Ace wouldn't be a bad choice, that's for sure. Okay, well, what about as a home defense, self-defense rifle? Absolutely. I have used this for home defense. Especially if you're talking about like prepared citizen, all those types of things, this is a great option. This is something that you can definitely fight with. Might be some things that you have to take into account. You've got the AK manual of arms and all those types of things, but it'll work. It'll do everything it is that you need it to do. This rifle has never hiccuped on me. It has been 100% reliable, and you can update it and adapt it to your fighting purposes. What about as a truck gun? Absolutely. This is a consistent truck gun option for me. That's why I like the side folding stock. Currently, my equipment is set up for this rifle as my truck gun because here recently the ATF has been struggling to approve my 5320.20s in time whenever it is that I go on a road trip. So this is the rifle that winds up coming with, and I do not feel unarmed carrying it with me. All right, well, what about as a competition gun? Depends on the competition. If you're in a dedicated competition where you're trying to be competitive against like ARs, I would not take this rifle. The amount of time that you're gonna have to dedicate to training with this gun, the amount of ammunition that you're gonna have to shoot in order to be able to be competitive in that competition would pay tenfold if you just did it to an AR-15. So I would not recommend this in like a 3-gun or something along those lines. But if you're talking about going to like an AK dedicated competition like Clash Bash or something along those lines, yeah, I would 100% recommend this. I think this feature set would do good things for you in that case. All right, what about as a hunting rifle? I think it kind of depends on how it is that you set this up. 7.62x3.9 would be perfectly fine for deer or boar, and you know it's kind of your local laws on whether or not you can have lights and lasers attached to the gun. You know, you can take those off, of course, for hunting season, and then capacity is also going to be an issue. But you should be able to rock and lock a 10-round magazine into this. Getting it out might be a little more difficult since that mag well is a little deeper, but something worth looking into. What about as a woods gun? Well, I wouldn't go hiking with this thing. It's very much so weight prohibitive, and I would not choose that. But if you're talking about like throwing this across the back of a four-wheeler or in your gator or something along those lines, keeping it available for predators of either the 2- or 4-legged variety, this would be a good choice for that purpose. Especially since you can beat up on it and it's going to be reliable because it's an AK-based rifle. All right, let's go ahead and talk about competitive offerings. If you're looking at a rifle like this, you're wanting something that's not an AR-15, but maybe still has some modern updates on it and stuff like that. So for that, you might look at something like the M&M Industries M10X, which actually a buddy of mine has. And come to think of it, has never let me shoot. Maybe that would be an interesting video at some point in the future. Let me know in the comments section. But the M10X is an interesting combination of some AK features along with a couple of other rifles included. That is something that you can consider be a competitive option. I wish that Valmets were more available. I wish that more of those had been imported or that they were currently being imported. However, that is not the case. So another competitive option would be the there's a version of the SIG 550 chambered in 7.62x3.9. I'll annotate below the nomenclature of that particular item. But That's an interesting option because it doesn't look like an AK, but it's chambered in 7.62 by 3.9, and that's just kind of neat. However, SIG rifles like that, like the 540s, the 550s, all that kind of stuff, not a lot of those have ever come in. So good luck finding one. And also have fun paying for it. But even this rifle is not a terribly inexpensive gun. So now let's get into, should you abandon your Galil Ace Gen 1 for a Gen 2? I think it depends on a couple of things. I would not fault you for selling your Gen 1 and going after the Gen 2 in order to be able to get that M-Lock handguard, because that is nice. However, I don't know if it's necessary to spend the amount of money again in order to be able to get that, because you're not going to recoup your investment on this rifle to begin with. So already you're going to be coming in kind of light, and then you're going to have to come up with the additional money to get something that is functionally the same as this. When you could instead install an M-Lock handguard on this one, you could install the AR-15 buffer tube and throw your AR stocks on here, and you could swap out this lower to be able to get AR-15 grips. So you could do a lot to update this rifle still and bring it more in line with the Gen 2 without having to purchase a Gen 2, without having to spend that amount of money. Now, I haven't crunched the numbers on what all those updates would cost, but I'm pretty sure it would be less than a whole new gun. And you can continue working around a gun that you're already comfortable with. So even with them updating like the safety and stuff like that, I don't find the safety to hold me back on this particular gun. So I don't think that's something that has to happen. As much as it's something that is just neat, that if you didn't already own a Galil Ace, you would probably want to go get a Gen 2 over trying to find a used Gen 1 in order to go ahead and get those updates. Unless it's an aesthetic thing, because I prefer the look of this rifle to the Gen 2. Like, I like the appearance of the Gen 1 with its modernizations more so than I like the Gen 2. Like, purely aesthetic. I like this handguard. I like the Picatinny and all that kind of stuff. It looks interesting to me. Whereas the M-Lock rail on the Gen 2 just looks like another gun trying to be an AR-15. I got a bunch of ARs. All right, Murph. What are your uses for the Galil Ace? Well, as I mentioned before, this is a truck gun for me. And it is a go-to option as a truck gun for me. Everything on this rifle is durable, well built, and built to last. Would I prefer something lighter? Yes, and I have lighter options. I have other truck guns. I have a whole video on truck guns if you're interested in that. Go ahead and check out the link in the description. So, I would 100% fight with this rifle if I had to. My preference would still be to fight with an AR-15, and that is purely based on the lifetime, or at least my adult lifetime experience with the AR-15. The gun comes very natural, has very natural manual of arms, and I've worked around it professionally and personally for well over a decade. So if you put this up against any of my AR-15s, I'm probably picking the ARs. If I had this with me already, I would not feel undergunned. I would feel perfectly adequate to be able to get through that fight. All right, guys. I think that pretty much covers my thoughts on this particular subject. Hope you guys found this interesting. That's pretty much what I got. Have a good day.